Hello, and welcome to Restoring Hope, the podcast of the Missionaries of the Precious Blood. I'm Patrick Higgins, and today we're joined by Sister Maria Hughes, General Superior of the Adorers of the Blood of Christ, a global community of women religious who live and share the spirituality of the precious blood through education, advocacy, and service. Sister Maria has spent her life answering God's call to love and to serve, following in the footsteps of her congregation's founder, St. Maria de Mattias. Today we'll talk about the Adorers' worldwide mission, the feminine perspective on spirituality, and how Sister Maria and her sisters live the call to care for our dear neighbor in our ever-changing world. Sister Maria, thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me. It's nice to be here.
Absolutely. We're thrilled to have you here, so we're gonna dive right in. Sister Maria, let's start with your personal story, the roots of your vocation, and the road that brought you to lead an international community of adorers. You grew up in Middletown, Ohio, and graduated
Middletown, Pennsylvania.
Good distinction. Okay. Thank you very much. All right. You grew up in Middletown, Pennsylvania, and graduated from Bishop McDevitt High School. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
How did those early experiences plant the seeds of your vocation?
Well, I think what planted the seeds of my vocation are my parents. My parents were very faithful people. When I was born, my father was I guess at the time they called him the sexton of the parish. He was took care of all the needs and the maintenance in the parish. We ended up in Middletown because my father, that was his last place of being stationed in the Army Air Force after World War II. And my sister's 12 years older, and then I came along. And my mother cooked for the priests. So we and the Dominican sisters from Columbus, Ohio, were in my parish. They were our teachers. So my father, in those days, we were always at the convent fixing things, and I was, of the three of us, I have an older sister, a younger brother. I was the one that always wanted to follow my dad around. I wanted to learn how to fix things and do things. And so we'd often end up at the convent with the sisters. And they were always very kind and very welcoming, and there was something about their life that always attracted me. And in the summers, my father would drive them to their summer schools or back to the mother house. And so these poor sisters, I showered them with, I was real little, I showered them with all kinds of questions, like did they have hair under their veils? And
Okay.
all kinds of things. But then later, our sisters, the Dominican sisters had decided, like many communities, were trying to pull closer to bring resources together. And our parish was the only parish where they had a school in our diocese, in our area. So they left, and my community came. And they had a mother house right in Columbia, Pennsylvania, 30 minutes from my house. And I was involved at that time. I was in high school, and I played the guitar, and we had a youth group. And I got to know our sisters then. And one of the sisters was the sister who was coordinating things. And she invited me. I often thought about religious life. And she often would invite me to come to the mother house with her when she drove another sister down. And I was dating and I was enjoying my teenage life. And maybe someday, sister, maybe someday. Well, someday came and I went with her, and then I went on what they called a live-in weekend. And really, being with our sisters, there was a presence about them. Even before they started in our parish, we had the Agnes flood, and Hurricane Agnes came through, and our sisters came and helped with the cleanup. And I remember my mother, who was working in the kitchen, we were cooking for all the victims down in our parish hall, and my mother commenting on this sister that got down on her hands and knees and scrubbed the floor. And they were like, sister, no. And she said, no, I worked with you and I will finish with you. And that's how I experienced our sisters. So when it came time to discern, it just was clear to me that even though my pastor asked me wisely to look at other communities, but I kept coming back to the Adorers, and that sense of presence to wherever the need is. And So here I
And
am.
here you are. Here you are. Okay. All right. Well, that's a fascinating story. So it sounds like you really delved into the order prior to your discernment process, correct?
Yeah. I got to know them
So,
through the sisters.
okay, through the sisters. So, as Superior General, how do you see your role in guiding a global congregation through continuity and change?
Well, when I was elected in 2023, the theme of the General Assembly at that time was all things new in the blood of Christ. And as a congregation, we were exploring what is it that is ours to do at this time. And so as we continue our mandate, myself and the other sisters on the team with me, we have what we call a direction statement that comes out of our General Assembly. And that's for the 6 years of our mandate. And it calls us to a number of things. But one of the strongest pieces for me that kind of couches everything else is about being credible and authentic presence, being sowers of hope with deep listening hearts, and promoting communion, which is so needed in our world today. So for us on the congregational level, ours is to animate, to encourage, to come or go around and visit and find ways of adding to the life of the congregation, listening to the sisters. We're divided in what we call regions, which are like provinces all over the world. So during the 6 years, we will visit all the regions and what we call foundations, which are smaller units and delegations and missions, which is about 27 different countries where our sisters are present. And the gift we have is seeing our charism and our spirit alive when we visit our sisters, and any way that we can help. And then to gather us, whether it's all the leaders of the regions or our formators or whoever it is, to bring the congregation together in communion, to carry out this direction statement, this mission, this spirit that St. Maria de Mattias began in 1834.
So, sister, would you say, as opposed to orders, obviously religious orders that are composed solely of men, is there a particular feminine perspective on spirituality that the sisters espouse?
Well, nothing against my brothers because I find them very relational.
Yes.
But I do think a feminine perspective of our spirituality is that women, that sense of relationship. Just today in a meeting, one of our team had listened to a video of some kind, and they were talking about the male-female perspective and how the male perspective opens the one drawer, gets what they need, does what he needs to do, and he's out of the drawer. The woman can have 5 drawers open and doing 5 different things and touching into everything and how it connects. And I thought about coming here to this, and I thought, in one sense, I think the feminine perspective is that relational piece. And for us, in particular, women of the blood of Christ, blood being present with those who suffer, but blood for life. You know, how blood gives life and promoting life is a source of life. The blood that is covenant and relationship and commitment. So maybe that's a bit of the feminine perspective of it all. We also can be direct, and we certainly, as you said, for my congregation, advocacy, but it is in relationship with others, not to go in and do for, but to be with. I was just reading the Pope's new exhortation, and he talks about, and it's a challenge, when we go with the poor. Do we go with our agenda and what we think they need, or do we listen and be where their needs are and listen to them and be transformed by the relationship with the poor? And I think that's always our push, and to be those deep listeners, the communion builders.
Well, okay, so that's a great segue, actually. Your direction statement calls for doors to be sowers of hope with deeply listening hearts. So, what does that look like in practice?
Well, let me think of a few things maybe that I've seen our sisters about. Um, I've seen our sisters, for example, here in Italy, like in many countries, there are a lot of immigrants and migrants, and that seems to be one of the new calls. And our sisters are trying to listen in different ways. And so they're sometimes taking properties that they've had and collaborating with others to make space, whether it's to come and a space to learn skills, to be enculturated into this new country. In our own house here at the General Aid, we have a collaboration with the San Egidio community. It does a lot of work with the poor and immigrants. And I'm not the first. Over many years, we have had refugee families living in one section of our house. It was a small house for a small part of the house for guests. And so we rehabbed it a little bit. It's very simple. And right now there's two Syrian families. They're related. There's a brother and a sister with their spouse and their children. And once they get situated and things more settled, San Egidio helps them move and get resettled because they're people without a home to go back to. So it's just lovely. There's a little boy, the youngest, there's two teenagers, but the little boy, George, he's catching on very quickly to the Italian. But he doesn't have a sense of us as sisters and titles or anything. So one day I came in through the gate and he was outside with his dad and he's, "Ciao, Maria, ciao, ciao, ciao." And I said, "Ciao, George." But, it being a seat of hope, a place, giving what we have. And many in the United States, our sisters, again, a lot with immigrants, a lot with the care of the earth. Our sisters in Poland, in Zagreb, in Croatia and Bosnia, our sisters in a country that has been war torn for many years and many times, their presence among people for healing, for hope, our sisters with people who suffer from addictions. I think for us as adorers, our charism is just made to plant seeds of hope. So
Yes, it is. It is.
and then the whole idea of deeply listening hearts is, getting out of the way and really listening,
Oh, that's a good
trying to
point.
put the voices in my head
Yeah.
outside and listen to what's right in front of me. And that's for each adorer, for us to do that.
Well, you touched on it, and this may be redundant because I think you've probably answered the question. But what do you see as the most pressing global issues that the adorers are called to respond to?
Well, it depends on what part of the world, but I think the bottom line is really to help build communion in a very fractured and fragile world, wherever our sisters are. I just was on an email conversation with a sister in the Philippines as the typhoons are going through, and they have a clinic. They work with children who are deaf. They work in parishes. So a lot of displaced people with the typhoons. But, so that's before them now. We have sisters who are from Poland who have reached out to Ukraine, who've reached out to Belarus, in those ways. As I talked about Bosnia, our sisters in Brazil, all along the Amazon. So I think everywhere we go, all the stories we hear, Tanzania right now, just this week, we have a region in Tanzania, and Tanzania had their elections, and that turned into a great unrest in the country, a country that normally is, and the missionaries are also there, that it's very peaceful country in Africa. And so we have some sisters right here in the house. Well, one of the sisters, who's the assistant novice director, got word that her brother was on the way home the night that things erupted, somehow got caught in crossfire and was killed. Her youngest brother. So we have a church that's part of our general aid. So we decided to have Mass and remember him and invite all those from Tanzania who are here in Italy who have distance from their families and communication's difficult. So we gave a space to have liturgy together, and they stayed and talked and shared, and we're so grateful. And for us, we all were crying through the whole Mass as they sang and prayed with all their heart, and they sang their national anthem, all at great attention. And it's another part of the world that's suffering. There's so much polarization, misunderstandings. So how can we be those bridges? So I think that that's a big piece. We educate. We're great educators. We're great at healthcare. We're great at social work. But all of that is about bringing hearts together.
Absolutely. So, sister, let me ask you, how do you find hope, like personally and as a community, in a world that obviously is marked by division and suffering and uncertainty?
It's a good question. And I'll say it depends on the day of the week, but I think my faith for sure. The Jesus of the Gospels gives me hope. It wasn't much different in the time of Jesus. It wasn't much different at the time of Gaspar del Buffalo or Maria de Mattias or Giovanni Merlini. If we can go back with all the saints and holy people, but in particular in our Precious Blood family, I think I find hope in how they just kept responding. And I think every morning I just get up, I put on my heart and cross, and I say I'm going to do the best I can, and I'll leave the rest to God. And all along the way, we have this prayer we attribute to our foundress. I'm not sure whether it was from that time, the Providence of God prayer, but trusting in the providence of God. And that really does, it gives me hope. I pray when I'm really, really stressed, I pray that prayer. And I always find something happens. We find the good Samaritans along the way, or something shows up, and it restores hope. I think the hope in just all of us together, looking around last night in our church was full, and all people of faith just coming to pray for peace and pray for those who have lost or suffered some kind of loss or been impacted. And we were very conscious of Tanzania is one of many places in our world, and probably right outside our door of our church on the streets here in Rome, of those that need healing and hope. So I just find it in being in community with one another.
Well, that in itself inspires hope. That story in itself generates hope. So thank you for that. That's encouraging. That's very encouraging. So let me talk about your founder, Sister Saint Maria de Mattias. She was obviously a woman of great courage and passion. How does her example continue to inspire you?
Oh, and what a privilege I have to be here. We were founded here in Italy, and our foundation is about an hour away, so we get to go there often.
Oh, you do?
So
okay.
I sit in that chapel thinking, Maria de Mattias sat here. Maria de Mattias struggled for what was right, what was next, what was God asking. And everything you read about Maria, we have many of her letters. She was as human as all of us. And she struggled with having her own confidence. But in all of her letters to the sisters is have courage, have great confidence in God. Trust in the power of the blood of Christ. Go to Mary Most Holy. So for me, I find in her, she had many struggles along the way in trying to just follow what was needed for the congregation. Starting out just answering a call to go to Acuto, Italy, and open a school. A woman who was never really formally educated, but was, as in Italy, known for one of the forefront of education. So, especially for the poor and for women. And she was her own kind of a preacher. And she did it in her own way. Gathered the women, they'd have their sewing circles or whatever on a Sunday and talk about the gospel stories. And no one could find fault with her theology because she had a heart that was just connected to God. So often there's a lot of images of her kneeling or standing with her hands open beneath the crucifix. And when I was younger in religious life, that image did not inspire me much. I looked very suffering, like I don't want to suffer that much. But in this position, and in other times in my life, I see that value of the cross isn't the sign of all the suffering. The cross is the sign of the redemption of suffering. What's next is resurrection. It doesn't end with the cross, but the cross, it says, you'll go through this and Jesus is with you and gives you the courage. So I thank Maria de Mattias for that. We have the body of our foundress in our chapel here. It's a church, actually, that's attached to our general aid. So every day I go past and I talk to her and I put the congregation back in her hands and definitely in God's hands. But just knowing that she went through her own struggles and our congregation is still alive and thriving. So
Absolutely it is. Yes. Yes. So, is there a favorite story or quote from Saint Maria that has shaped your leadership?
I don't have it exactly, but it's have great courage and confidence in God. Pray much, and you will see miracles. That's my paraphrase of it. But
yeah.
and you will
Okay,
see miracles.
that's inspirational. Absolutely. So, how do you encourage your younger sisters or those discerning religious life to connect with the legacy of Saint Maria?
It doesn't take much. They actually encourage me. We just this summer had some sisters here who are either have made or near their perpetual profession. And there were about 8 of them here. And every day we were all inspired by them. But they were just, for many of them, it was their first time to be here, to touch the roots of the congregation. And, they've studied the Constitution. They've read the history of the congregation. They've read the stories of Maria de Mattias. But they came with their own life stories of being adorers and what it is in the part of the world where they are. And I find that everywhere we go, as I meet our newer members, they are an inspiration. They connect intergenerationally with our sisters, and they bring the gifts of their own generation and their own insights to where we are now and where we can be. I am the oldest one on our general team. So there's some younger ones on the team with me. So I continue to be inspired every day.
I'm going to jump around a bit. The phrase which I found particularly compelling, the phrase "caring for our dear neighbor," kind of very beautifully sums up the ASC approach to your mission. What does that mean to you today, personally? Your personal inspiration from that.
The dear neighbor can be anyone. You're the dear neighbor. The dear neighbor is whoever we meet, wherever there's woundedness or need, encounter. Sometimes it's a sister sitting beside me in chapel, at the dinner table. It's the person I meet in the grocery store. We say every person is worth the blood of Christ. So every person we meet. And sometimes the dear neighbor are those people that I struggle to accept. Maybe I don't agree with them. Maybe I have a different political view than they do, or a different set of values. But everyone is the dear neighbor. And somewhere in there is the Jesus that I should find, the God.
Okay, sister, let me ask you, how do you, and I'm jumping around again, so I apologize. This has been a fascinating conversation. How do the adorers, I guess, create spaces for women's voices, especially those of the younger sisters and lay collaborators, to be heard in decision making?
That's a piece we're working on in different parts. In some parts of the world, they're all young. For example, Tanzania is our youngest region, and I think the oldest of the sisters are in their 60s. I'm from the United States, where we have 100-year-olds. Here in Italy, we have 100-year-olds, but Tanzania, India, they're all younger, much younger. But I think what we try to do, we've really been working very carefully, and it's in the direction statement. We were talking today. We've talked about this in many ways. Before, being synodal was the word, thanks to Pope Francis. But that whole idea of being synodal in our conversations, that everybody has a piece of the truth, and how do we gather, how do we share, bring our best wisdom, and then ways of encountering one another, that we listen, that we're not always having another voice while somebody else is talking, that creating that space. Our sisters also, in many parts of the world, have a lot of ministry and outreach to women victims of domestic violence, women and children. We have Village of Hope in Tanzania, that are children who are, and the missionaries are all, again, there's a lot of collaboration with the missionaries and the adorers around the world. So in all of that, I think it's not just our younger members, but with everyone trying to find ways to collaborate. I don't think we have those days anymore where religious congregations stand all by themselves in the world. That's not the world we want to live in. We want to live in a world where we're all brothers and sisters, and we hopefully all try to collaborate for the good and the common good of all.
And that's a good point, because you do work with a lot of lay collaborators, correct?
Yes, we do.
What can you touch a little bit on Village of Hope in Tanzania? That's probably fodder for an entire episode, but I was hoping that you could touch on that a little bit for
Yeah,
us.
I would get you number of other sisters and some of the missionaries to talk about that, but I did visit there last December. I went to Tanzania, and I had the opportunity to be at Village of Hope. And right now, Sister Rosaria, one of the founders, is home for her home visit, and she's been staying at our house.
What is Village of Hope?
Village of Hope, it started at the time of the great AIDS crisis, and children who were left victims from AIDS. Africa was struggling very much, and I don't have the complete history, but one of the missionaries and one of our sisters saw some need, and they started to take in these children and find ways to help them. Well, it has grown. It is a huge, huge facility with its own clinic. It is truly a village, and what it is, it's a home for these children. And many of these children are not orphaned anymore. Some of them are, but maybe their families can't take care of them. But there's schools from the very early childhood to secondary. There's a farm. They have a farm. They have a bakery. All kinds of ways to learn trades and to develop their gifts and skills and build communion with one another. And they live in these like cottages where they have parents with them. So they have a more sense of as close to a normality of being in a family and not an institution. And so they're lovely grounds. They've taken great care, and a lot of people have volunteered and donated over many, many, many decades for it to be what it is today. Some of our sisters are nurses, nurse midwives, technicians, doctors, and then there are lay doctors, lay nurses, lay teachers, lay parents, and to watch the care that these children receive and that they learn to give one another, watching them with one another. It was very, very touching. And to know that the adorers and the missionaries are part of that. And it's, being men and women who want to create life and promote life in a time when it can be very difficult and families are torn apart.
In that vein, in what ways do the tenets of the adorers connect with the broader Precious Blood family, including Missionaries of the Precious Blood? Missionaries of the Precious Blood, obviously, being the podcast that we're on today, but how do the adorers and the Missionaries of the Precious Blood kind of mesh?
Oh, well, first of all, it goes back to our roots. It was the words of Gaspar del Buffalo that inspired Maria de Mattias to do something with her life. And he invited Giovanni Merlini to accompany her and invited her to consider a group of women of the Precious Blood. I think for us, in many ways, we do a lot of collaboration among us. We have our leaders meet. There are times we have shared retreats together. We share ministry together. When I was in Chicago at Catholic Theological Union, I directed a program for formators. And there was a Dayton Precious Blood sister there and myself, and our apartments were nearby. So we formed a bit of community together. And the missionaries had their formation house there. And from the time I was there, Bill Nordenbrock was there and Mark Paris, and I've been invited to come and be part of the community with them and also share in the formation. Like I gave workshops and different things. Our people in formation get together and they have their weekends together and they share about maybe a topic and then I'm finding out in this position in many different places where our sisters and the missionaries work very closely together. Tanzania is one place. And in Croatia, Father Ilya and the missionaries there and our sisters. Also in Poland, our sisters and the missionaries work closely together. In parts of Brazil and Latin America, definitely. Our region of the U.S., we still, there's ministry there. Our sisters are no longer in direct service there. But in Guatemala, worked with the missionaries. So to me, it's like hand in glove, how we are together. We ask each other, do you have somebody to do this? Or do you know how somebody who can help with this? And here, Father Emanuele and I, we get together and we talk and we help. He just recently asked me to do something for them in January. We collaborated in the Jubilee for the Precious Blood that we had here. Also, Giovanni Merlini's beatification. It's a natural thing. I often refer to them as my brothers, my brothers, our brother community and us, and then there's the rest of the Precious Blood family. And the Jubilee of the Precious Blood was an example of that. Many of the other, mostly women's communities that participated and engaged. And I learned more about what they're about. And I know the Dayton Precious Blood sisters have been very connected with the missionaries from Ohio, especially. Our sisters in Wichita, Father Tom is the chaplain there at our house in Wichita. And in Kansas City, they've been engaged with the missionaries. So there's, and in my own former province of Columbia, we were with the missionaries from Ohio, were our chaplains at our mother house when I was in formation. And we also had connection with the missionaries in the Atlantic province.
So obviously you're not no one's doing this in a vacuum. You're all working together, and it, as they say, it takes a village. Absolutely. Sister, if our readers want to learn more about the Adores, where can they go online, or how can they investigate that?
Well, there in the United States, the U.S. Adores have their own website. If you just Google the U.S. Adores of the Blood of Christ, they have a wonderful website, and it'll connect you to the international pieces as well. It'll tell you about Maria de Mattias, about what our sisters are about now and have been. We have a website for the congregation as well. We're working on it. That one needs a little work. We found some broken links in there. So a little bit of fragile part of the world we have to fix over here. And our Facebook, the congregation has a Facebook page, and so does almost all of our region. So any part of the world where we are, you can probably find us.
Well, great. Well, sister, thank you so much for sharing your spirituality and your story with us today. Your words remind us that the spirituality of the precious blood, which is obviously lived so beautifully by the Adores, isn't just a heritage to preserve, but a living force that renews the church around the world. It's been a very interesting conversation. If any of our listeners want to learn more about the missionaries of the precious blood, we are at preciousbloodus.org, and we're also on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. So again, Sister Maria Hughes, thank you very much for joining us. You've been listening to Restoring Hope, the podcast of the Missionaries of the Precious Blood. Until next time, may the blood of Christ, that which makes all things new, guide us to love without limits. Thank you very much, sister. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you. Thank you.